From a flicker of candlelight in 1789 to the glare of modern screens in the West Wing, every president has held the pen. Executive orders not passed by Congress, but etched into law by command. Some shaped history. Some sparked controversy. Others were forgotten. Until now. This is where we break them down. Every signature, every shift in power, every consequence still felt today. From Washington to Biden, welcome to Executive Order Watch.
Democracy, we live for it. For democracy, we fight for it. For democracy, we've died for it. And for democracy, we watch it. This is Executive Order Watch.
My fellow Americans, the year 1974 was one of the most trying, most consequential, and most defining years of my public life, and of the American presidency itself. When the year began, I remained committed to the mission of rebuilding our economy, securing energy independence, reducing the size of government, and ensuring that the peace we had sought for so long, particularly in Southeast Asia, was finally maintained. We had, after all, ended America's combat role in Vietnam the previous year. Prisoners of war had come home. It was time for a new chapter. But 1974 was not a year of smooth sailing. It was a year of storms, both literal and political. The energy crisis continued to bear down on the American people. Gas shortages, long lines at stations, and rising costs pushed us to rethink how this country powered its future. In response, we launched Project Independence, a bold plan to reduce our reliance on foreign oil and strengthen our domestic capabilities. We encouraged conservation, efficiency, and innovation, not just as economic imperatives, but as patriotic duties. Inflation, too, began to tighten its grip. The economy was under pressure from multiple directions: oil shocks, deficit spending, and global uncertainty. My administration acted swiftly, using the tools available to the executive branch to stabilize prices, reinforce wages, and hold government spending in check. It was not easy, but leadership rarely is. Meanwhile, around the world, the Cold War continued, quiet in some arenas, tense in others. We pursued détente with the Soviet Union, pushing forward on arms limitation and trade normalization. Our new relationship with the People's Republic of China matured, slowly, but with purpose. But I cannot speak of 1974 without confronting the deepest challenge of my presidency, the Watergate scandal, which had grown into a full-blown constitutional crisis. Investigations intensified. Public confidence wavered. The press, Congress, and the American people demanded answers, and rightly so. In August of that year, I made the most difficult decision of my life. I chose to resign the presidency, not because I admitted guilt in every charge, but because the burdens of the office could no longer be met under the weight of prolonged division and distraction. I placed the interests of the nation above my own. I stepped aside, not out of weakness, but out of duty to preserve the integrity of the institution itself. It was a painful ending, but not the end of the American story. The presidency moved forward as it must. The country endured, as it always has. And the Constitution proved once again that no man is above the law and no institution is beyond reform. Yet through it all, even in those final months, I continued to govern. I signed executive orders that carried out critical duties, managing resources, responding to crises, enforcing environmental protections, and reshaping government structure to meet the demands of a new era. In a moment, we'll take a closer look at those executive orders, what they aimed to accomplish, how they reflected my priorities at the time, and how they continue to influence the nation today. But before we do, let us remember, 1974 was not merely a year of scandal. It was a year of transition, a year of reckoning, a year that tested the strength of the presidency and proved that even in the darkest hours, this republic stands. Now let's turn to the executive orders of 1974 and see what they tell us about the challenges we faced and the choices we made. Executive Order 11,758 delegating authority of the President under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 on January 15, 1974. Executive Order 11,759 prescribing the compensation of certain officials in the Domestic and International Business Administration, Department of Commerce on January 15, 1974. Executive Order 11,760 designating the European Space Research Organization, ESRO, as a public international organization entitled to enjoy certain privileges, exemptions, and immunities on January 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,761 to facilitate coordination of federal education programs on January 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,762 delegating to the Administrator of Veterans Affairs certain authority relating to grants in aid to the Republic of the Philippines for medical care and treatment of veterans on January 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,763, establishing a National Commission for the Observance of World Population Year on January 17, 1974. Executive Order 11,764, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs on January 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,765, sale of vessels of the Navy on January 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,766, modifying rates of interest equalization tax on January 29, 1974. Executive Order 11,767, designating the Organization of African Unity as a public international organization entitled to enjoy certain privileges, exemptions, and immunities on February 19, 1974. Executive Order 11,768, placing certain positions in levels 4 and 5 of the executive schedule on February 20, 1974. Executive Order 11,769, Advisory Committee Management on February 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,770, International Symposium on Geothermal Energy, 1975 on February 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,771, extending diplomatic privileges and immunities to the Liaison Office of the People's Republic of China in Washington, D.C., and to members thereof on March 18, 1974. Executive Order 11,772. Delegating certain authority of the President to the Secretary of State on March 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,773. Revoking the authority of the Department of Agriculture to inspect income tax returns on March 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,774, amending Executive Order Number 11,768, placing certain positions in levels 4 and 5 of the Executive Schedule on March 26, 1974. Executive Order 11,775, abolishing the Energy Policy Office on March 26, 1974. Executive Order 11,776. Continuing the President's Committee on Mental Retardation and broadening its membership and responsibilities on March 28, 1974. Executive Order 11,777, amending Executive Order Number 11,691, adjusting rates of pay for certain statutory pay systems on April 12, 1974. Executive Order 11,778, amending Executive Order Number 11,692, adjusting the rates of monthly basic pay for members of the Uniformed Services on April 12, 1974. Executive Order 11,779, delegating the authority of the President under Section 9 of the United Nations Participation Act, as amended, to the Secretary of State on April 19, 1974. Executive Order 11,780, amending Executive Order Number 11,768, placing certain positions in levels 4 and 5 of the Executive Schedule on April 22, 1974. Executive Order 11,781, providing for an orderly termination of the Economic Stabilization Program on May 1, 1974. Executive Order 11,782, establishing the Federal Financing Bank Advisory Council on May 6, 1974. Executive Order 11,783, creating an emergency board to investigate a dispute between the carriers represented by the National Railway Labor Conference and certain of their employees on May 21, 1974. Executive Order 11,784, delegating to the Administrator of General Services certain authority to issue regulations relating to joint funding on May 30, 1974. Executive Order 11,785, amending Executive Order number 10,450, as amended, relating to security requirements for government employment and for other purposes on June 4, 1974. Executive Order 11,786, inspection of tax returns by the Committee on the Judiciary, House of Representatives on June 7, 1974. Executive Order 11,787, revoking Executive Order number 10,987, relating to agency systems for appeals from adverse actions on June 11, 1974. Executive Order 11,788, providing for the orderly termination of economic stabilization activities on June 18, 1974. Executive Order 11,789, President's Committee on East-West Trade Policy on June 25, 1974. Executive Order 11,790, providing for the effectuation of the Federal Energy Administration Act of 1974 on June 25, 1974. Executive Order 11,791, exemption of Kenneth H. Tuggle from mandatory retirement on June 25, 1974. Executive Order 11,792, abolishing the Advisory Council on Intergovernmental Personnel Policy on June 25, 1974. Executive Order 11,793. Designation of certain officers of the Department of Agriculture to act as Secretary of Agriculture on July 10, 1974. Executive Order 11,794, revoking Executive Order number 10,958, relating to the Civil Defense Medical and Food Stockpiles on July 11, 1974. Executive Order 11,795, delegating disaster relief functions pursuant to the Disaster Relief Act of 1974 on July 11, 1974. Executive Order 11,796, continuing the regulation of exports on July 30, 1974. Executive Order 11,797, delegating to the Secretary of Agriculture the function of submitting an annual report to the Congress concerning the location of new federal facilities in rural areas on July 31, 1974.
Pauline's Pizza, where we deliver happiness one slice at a time. What's your craving today?
Hi, can you tell me about your menu?
Of course. We offer handmade pizzas with different crusts like thin crust, original, or deep dish. We also have fresh salads, pastas, and both bone-in and boneless wings. Would you like to hear about our specialty pies or any current special deals?
Do you have any gluten-free options?
Yes, we do. Our gluten-free crusts are super tasty, but there's a $3 upcharge. Would you like me to go over the options with you?
Great. What's the largest size pizza you offer?
Our largest size is the extra large pizza, perfect for feeding a crowd. Plus, if you upgrade to an extra large, you'll get a free 2-liter soda. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Can I get that gluten-free?
Absolutely. You can get the extra large with a gluten-free crust. What toppings would you like on your pizza?
Do you offer any vegan cheese options?
Yes, we do. Our vegan cheese is delicious and comes with a $3 upcharge. Would you like to add that to your gluten-free pizza?
Yes.
Great choice. So we've got an extra large gluten-free pizza with vegan cheese. Any other toppings you'd like to add?
Well, one moment. What about hosting an event? Do you have any space for a birthday party?
Yes, we do host parties and offer catering. Let me get your email address so I can send over our catering plans. How many people are you planning to invite?
I left my sunglasses there last week. Can you check if they're still there?
I can definitely check for you. Can you describe the sunglasses for me?
They're black with silver frames.
Thanks for the details. I'll have someone check on that for you. Is there anything else I can help with today?
No, that's all for now. I'll call back later. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Terrence, a marketing professional with a passion for helping your business grow smarter and faster. Here at Da Bomb Digital Media, based right here in Atlanta, Georgia, we specialize in bringing your vision to life. Whether you're launching your first website or reimagining your entire digital presence, we've got you covered. From modern website design and search engine optimization to setting up your own AI-powered agency tools, we deliver innovative solutions that keep you ahead of the curve. Ready to unlock your business's full potential? Let's build something remarkable together. For more information, visit our YouTube channel. Just search DaBomb Digital Media on YouTube and start exploring tips, success stories, and everything you need to elevate your brand.
74.
My fellow Americans, let's talk about 1974, a year that shook the very core of American democracy and demanded everything from its institutions, its people, and its president. By the start of that year, Richard Nixon was deep into his second term. The country was facing an economic storm, skyrocketing inflation, an energy crisis, and a growing sense of mistrust in government. The OPEC oil embargo still lingered from the year before, choking supply lines, driving up prices, and exposing just how vulnerable we were to forces beyond our borders. The economy faltered, the cost of food and fuel was up, families were worried, and confidence in Washington was fading fast. And at the heart of that storm loomed Watergate. As investigations deepened and evidence mounted, President Nixon's executive authority was under scrutiny like never before. 1974 was the year the American public got a closer look behind the curtain. Secret tapes, legal battles, and a president under siege, not from a foreign power, but from the truth itself. And yet, amid all this, the business of governing continued. President Nixon issued over 40 executive orders that year, orders that tried to hold together a fraying economy, respond to national emergencies, and manage a country in transition. Some of these executive orders had clear and lasting value. He established the Federal Energy Administration, laying the groundwork for today's Department of Energy and helping us chart a course toward long-term energy security. He restructured Disaster Response Authority under the new Disaster Relief Act of 1974, giving federal agencies a clearer mandate in times of crisis. He even streamlined advisory boards, delegated international responsibilities, and made key reforms to federal hiring, pay scales, and the structure of executive governance. But not all of it helped. Some executive orders continued the trend of consolidating power, shifting important oversight into narrower corridors of control. Others laid the foundation for bureaucratic inefficiencies that we still wrestle with today, and some were simply lost in the noise of the moment, drowned out by the overwhelming roar of political scandal. On August 9th, the president resigned. It was the first time in our history that a sitting president stepped down from office. His departure wasn't just about one man. It was a test of our Constitution, and we passed that test. Power transitioned peacefully, lawfully, and without a single shot fired. But in the shadow of resignation, we also have to examine what was done through executive power in that final year, what it meant then and what it means now. And so, as we look back on the executive orders of 1974, let's ask ourselves which ones offered clarity, which ones provided strength, and which ones reflected a presidency no longer grounded in the trust of the people. In just a moment, we're going to walk through the top 10 executive orders of 1974, not just in terms of policy, but in terms of impact, consequence, and legacy. Let's dive in. At home, the economy was staggering under the weight of inflation, high unemployment, and the aftershocks of the OPEC oil embargo. Abroad, Cold War diplomacy pressed on, and alliances were tested. But the greatest shock came from within. This was the year that the Watergate scandal reached its climax. A sitting president, under intense investigation, faced mounting evidence, public outcry, and an erosion of trust. On August 9, 1974, President Richard Nixon resigned from the office of the presidency. For the first time in our nation's history, a president stepped down, not through war, not through election, but through accountability. Yet even as trust crumbled, the machinery of governance rolled forward. That year, President Nixon issued 45 executive orders. Despite the political chaos, those orders touched energy, disaster relief, civil rights, education, foreign diplomacy, and federal pay structures. They were tools of urgent necessity, some stabilizing a country in crisis, others restructuring systems for long-term use. Major global events in 1974, Cyprus invasion, Turkey invaded Cyprus after a coup backed by Greece, escalating NATO tensions. India conducts nuclear tests, smiling Buddha. India became the sixth nuclear power, shifting global security dynamics. Ethiopia's emperor overthrown. Haile Selassie was deposed, marking a shift in African geopolitics. Portuguese Carnation Revolution ended dictatorship and colonial rule in Africa. Nixon's resignation, viewed globally as a landmark moment in democratic accountability. Major events affecting only America. Nixon resigns, August 9, 1974. First U.S. president to do so. Transitioned power peacefully to Gerald Ford. I am not a crook. Speech. Fallout. Public perception of presidential integrity reached historic lows. Rise of Gerald Ford. Ford assumed the presidency, appointed Nelson Rockefeller as vice president, and emphasized restoring faith in government. Whip inflation now. Win. Ford's slogan-driven campaign against inflation, though largely ineffective, reflected urgency. Privacy Act of 1974. Passed, strengthened data protections and FOIA processes in response to Watergate-era overreach. Number 1. Executive Order 11,790. Effectuation of the Federal Energy Administration Act of 1974. Signed June 25, 1974. Historical background. In the aftermath of the 1973 oil embargo by OPEC, the United States faced widespread fuel shortages, long gas lines, and inflationary pressures. Congress passed the Federal Energy Administration Act to centralize crisis response. Purpose of the order. This EO activated the Federal Energy Administration, FEA, giving it legal authority to regulate fuel supplies, enforce energy conservation measures, and collect critical energy consumption data. Impact in 1974. It immediately enabled the federal government to coordinate fuel rationing and establish emergency energy policies, providing a central authority in a chaotic energy environment. Modern legacy. The FEA later became part of the U.S. Department of Energy. Today's fuel efficiency standards, strategic petroleum reserve, and energy infrastructure security all trace back to this foundation. Number 2, Executive Order 11,795, delegating functions under the Disaster Relief Act of 1974, signed July 11, 1974. Historical background. Repeated failures in federal disaster response prompted the passage of the Disaster Relief Act of 1974, designed to streamline aid delivery and clarify federal roles. Purpose of the order. Delegated key authorities under the Act to the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, ensuring rapid deployment of aid and oversight of grants during natural disasters. Impact in 1974. Allowed federal agencies to respond more swiftly to emergencies like floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes, reducing bureaucratic delay during crises. Modern legacy served as a direct legal precursor to the creation of FEMA in 1979. Much of today's federal emergency response framework, including coordination with state governments, originates here. Number 3, Executive Order 11,758, implementation of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Signed January 15, 1974. Historical background. The Rehabilitation Act of 1973 was landmark legislation aimed at protecting individuals with disabilities from discrimination in programs receiving federal funding. Purpose of the order. Formally delegated enforcement responsibilities to the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, allowing the federal government to begin regulatory and compliance actions. Impact in 1974. Agencies receiving federal funds, including universities, hospitals, and transit systems, were now required to take measurable steps to accommodate individuals with disabilities. Modern legacy. This order set the precedent for Section 504 enforcement, which laid the foundation for the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, ADA, and the modern accessibility movement. Number 4, Executive Order 11,764, Non-Discrimination in Federally Assisted Programs, signed January 21, 1974. Historical background. Following the Civil Rights Act of 1964, federal programs needed continuous regulation to ensure compliance, especially as new funding programs expanded. Purpose of the order: reaffirmed and expanded non-discrimination policies by consolidating earlier EOs and reassigning regulatory oversight to the Civil Rights Division. Impact in 1974. Strengthened civil rights enforcement by ensuring that federal dollars couldn't be used in discriminatory ways, especially in housing, education, and healthcare. Modern legacy continues to influence federal grants, contracts, and program evaluations. It is the backbone of today's Title VI compliance in federally funded institutions. Number 5, Executive Order 11,788, termination of the Economic Stabilization Program. Signed June 18, 1974. Historical background. Nixon had instituted wage and price controls in the early 1970s to curb inflation, an experiment that began to fail by 1974. Purpose of the order: formally ended the Economic Stabilization Program, effectively ceasing direct federal intervention in wage and price setting. Impact in 1974: allowed prices to float again in a volatile economic environment. It led to a short-term spike in inflation, but marked a return to market-driven economics. Modern legacy: the failure of this program became a cautionary tale. Modern economists cite this episode when evaluating inflation control tools, such as interest rate policy and monetary tightening instead of wage caps. Number 6, Executive Order 11,771, extending privileges to China's liaison office. Signed March 18, 1974. Historical background: Nixon's 1972 visit to China marked a diplomatic breakthrough. By 1974, both nations sought to normalize ties. Purpose of the order: granted diplomatic privileges to the People's Republic of China's liaison office in Washington, D.C., bringing China closer to full recognition. Impact in 1974: allowed for higher-level, more formal interactions between the two governments, including intelligence sharing, trade discussions, and cultural exchanges. Modern legacy: this step was foundational in the 1979 establishment of formal relations. U.S.-China economic integration, supply chain dependence, and geopolitical tension today all trace their roots to this pivot. Number 7, Executive Order 11,769, Advisory Committee Reform. Signed February 21, 1974. Historical background: concerns over government transparency and conflicts of interest in advisory boards led to mounting public pressure. Purpose of the order: revamp the structure and oversight of federal advisory committees to ensure transparency, accountability, and public trust. Impact in 1974: resulted in the removal of outdated committees and reorganization of others to align with public disclosure and ethics laws. Modern legacy: reinforced by the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA. Today's federal advisory boards must operate openly, publish meeting records, and include diverse perspectives. Number 8, Executive Order 11,779, delegating United Nations Participation Act authority to Secretary of State. Signed April 19, 1974. Historical background: the U.S. sought to streamline foreign policy execution during complex Cold War diplomacy. Purpose of the order: gave the Secretary of State operational authority under the United Nations Participation Act, improving response time to global developments. Impact in 1974: enabled swifter engagement in UN negotiations, peacekeeping missions, and sanctions coordination without presidential micromanagement. Modern legacy: continues today in the form of diplomatic agility in international crises like Ukraine, Iran, and global health diplomacy. Number 9, Executive Order 11,793, succession in the Department of Agriculture. Signed July 10, 1974. Historical background: amid rising concerns about continuity in government due to Nixon's legal troubles, departmental succession plans became essential. Purpose of the order: designated clear lines of succession within the Department of Agriculture to ensure uninterrupted leadership during emergencies. Impact in 1974: brought administrative stability to key federal agencies amid national uncertainty, especially during food security and rural development crises. Modern legacy: forms the model for continuity of operations planning, COOP, across all federal departments, especially critical during COVID-19 and government shutdowns. Number 10, Executive Order 11,797, Annual Reports on Rural Facility Placement. Signed July 31st, 1974. Historical background: There was growing concern that rural America was being left behind as federal agencies concentrated services in urban areas. Purpose of the order: required the Secretary of Agriculture to report annually to Congress on the distribution of new federal facilities in rural areas. Impact in 1974. Ensured rural development was on the national radar, helping inform infrastructure funding and post office service site planning. Modern legacy influences ongoing federal efforts like rural development grants, broadband expansion, and rural health care facility funding under modern administrations. 1974, the broader landscape. Outside the executive orders, 1974 was a global tremor. In America, President Nixon resigned on August 9th, the first and only president to do so. Vice President Gerald Ford assumed office and shortly after issued a controversial pardon of Nixon. Inflation, an energy crisis, and a credibility gap consumed the public's trust in government. Globally, the Yom Kippur War's aftermath and the oil embargo from OPEC sent shockwaves across energy-dependent economies. In Portugal, the Carnation Revolution peacefully overthrew a dictatorship, inspiring democratic movements worldwide. India tested its first nuclear device, reshaping Asian geopolitics.
Through it all, Nixon's executive orders reflect a presidency struggling to project authority while facing collapse, a strange duality of bureaucratic normalcy and historical upheaval. But these orders weren't meaningless. They gave rise to agencies, programs, and regulations that outlasted their author. And now, nearly 50 years later, their echoes are felt in how we administer energy policy, manage disasters, protect civil rights, and engage the world. Next, we'll walk through a top 10 list of these 1974 executive orders, with deeper historical notes and modern relevance. Stay with me. Ladies and gentlemen, let us return to the early hours of June 17, 1972. A quiet morning shattered by a strange event. 5 men in suits and surgical gloves breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters inside the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. At first, the White House dismissed it as a third-rate burglary. But that, my friends, was the beginning of a constitutional firestorm. What followed was not just a scandal. It was a test of American democracy, a test of how far power could reach before the people pulled it back. Segment 1. The Watergate Trial. When Judge John Sirica opened the trial of the Watergate 7 in January of 1973, federal investigators had already connected the burglars to a shady slush fund managed by the Committee to Re-elect the President, headed by Nixon's former Attorney General, John Mitchell. Some of the accused, like E. Howard Hunt, pleaded guilty. Others, like G. Gordon Liddy and James McCord, stood their ground and were convicted. But the real crack came when McCord, facing serious time, wrote a letter to the judge. He said it plain: they were pressured to lie, that they were pawns of higher-ups in the White House. That letter? That's what cracked the case wide open. What started as a burglary became a political war zone. Segment 2. Senate Hearings. The Senate didn't flinch. By May 1973, they formed the Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities, led by the no-nonsense Southern gentleman Senator Sam Ervin. They took it to the public. Televised hearings brought Americans face-to-face with betrayal from within. And there, front and center, was John Dean, Nixon's own counsel, dropping bombshells. He testified that Nixon didn't just know about the cover-up, he directed it. Then came a thunderclap from behind the scenes. Alexander Butterfield, a little-known White House aide, revealed that every conversation in the Oval Office was being recorded. Some write history with blood, some with laws. But the sharpest stroke comes from the pen. Executive power ain't just a tool, it's a weapon wielded by the few, affecting the many. They sign it, we live it. They order it, we obey it. Here, watching, digging, remembering. From the plantation to the proclamation, from internment camps to civil rights stands, from surveillance laws to student loan draws. Reporter can change your life, and you might not even know it, but now you do. So stay locked in, stay woke, stay sharp. We ain't just talking about power, we tracking it. Executive Order Watch, and we ain't blinking.